Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating paradox. You know, why do so many incredibly hardworking people just remain financially stuck? Well, we're going to break down something called the first paycheck rule. It's a priority savings framework that completely flips traditional budgeting right on its head. Let's dive in. So, why do hard workers stay broke? Man, it is a deeply frustrating reality. You put in the hours, you earn a solid salary, you do everything society tells you to do, right? And yet, you still feel completely stuck. It's kind of like running on a treadmill that just keeps speeding up. You're exhausted, but you aren't actually getting anywhere.
All right, section 1, the paycheck to paycheck trap.
To really get this, let's meet Michael. He's 35, works a standard office job, and makes a perfectly respectable living. He's not out there buying private jets or luxury cars, but here's his late-night inner monologue. Why am I working so hard but still have nothing to show for it? Picture him just sitting on his couch, phone glowing in the dark, staring at his banking app in total disbelief. He's grinding 40-plus hours a week, but that end-of-month balance, it never seems to reflect the effort he's pouring in. It's just that heavy, sinking feeling of spinning your wheels.
And the culprit is this brutal 4-step sequence. Watch how fast this happens. Step 1, the paycheck hits. Step 2, immediately pay the bills. Step 3, a few dinners out, maybe some online shopping, a random coffee here and there. And step 4, empty. The money is just gone. It happens so fast, it literally evaporates into these random everyday expenses he barely even remembers making. A swipe here, a tap there, and poof, the month's over and the account is wiped clean again.
Which brings us to section 2, a costly wake-up call.
See, that paycheck to paycheck cycle is incredibly fragile. It only works when life goes exactly according to plan. Enter the $2,800 car repair. Let the weight of that number just sink in for a second. Because cars seemingly have this tragic sixth sense for exactly when your checking account is at its most vulnerable, Michael's broke down out of nowhere. And because his money was constantly evaporating through that 4-step cycle, he didn't have the cash. He was instantly forced to slap this massive bill onto a credit card, plunging right into high-interest debt. That night, the weight of the world just crashed down on him. He's lying there asking, am I going to spend my entire life living paycheck to paycheck? He felt entirely defeated. Couldn't sleep, just staring at the ceiling, absolutely terrified of the next emergency. What if something worse happens? What if he loses his job? What about a medical emergency? This wasn't just about a broken car anymore. It was a glaring spotlight on how vulnerable his entire financial life really was.
And that is exactly where we hit section 3, the Millionaire secret rule. Exhausted and desperate for some guidance, Michael goes to see his grandfather. Now, his grandpa is a self-made millionaire, built a successful business from the ground up. So they're sitting together on the porch. His grandfather listens to the whole story, smiles warmly, and asks this deceptively simple question. Michael, when your paycheck arrives, who gets paid first? Michael, totally confused, thinks about his routine and answers like most of us would. The bills, I guess? His grandfather slowly shakes his head and says, that is exactly why you're struggling.
Then, he drops the fundamental mindset shift that built his entire wealth. Millionaires always pay themselves first. Think about it. Most people spend their money on bills and lifestyle and then just cross their fingers and try to save whatever leftovers they can scrape together. But successful people? They flip the script entirely. They save right off the top and spend what remains. I know, it sounds ridiculously simple, but this is the exact psychological shift that changes the whole game.
All right, section 4, putting rule into practice.
Because hearing the advice is one thing, right? Actually executing it takes a real leap of faith. So on his very next payday, Michael immediately routes 20% of his income straight into a separate investment account. Just gone. That leaves 80% for his living expenses. And he does this before paying a single bill, before groceries, before any late-night online shopping. That 20% is completely locked away for his future. His grandfather told him to treat his future like his most important bill, and that is exactly what he did. But honestly, it was not easy at first. Actually, it was kind of nerve-wracking. When Michael looked at his checking account after moving that money out, it hurt. That remaining balance looked uncomfortably small. He was genuinely sweating over how he was going to survive the month on this forcibly reduced budget. But here is the crazy part. As weeks turned into months,
this fascinating behavioral shift happened. Because he literally had less cash available, he just naturally adapted. He stopped wasting money on forgettable purchases, he cooked at home a bit more often, he completely audited his life and canceled those weird subscriptions he never used anyway. He just paused and thought twice before impulse buying. And these weren't some agonizing, painful sacrifices, they were empowering byproducts. For the very first time in his adult life, Michael actually felt like he was in the driver's seat of his finances.
Which perfectly tees up Section 5, the power of consistency.
Look, taking 20% out of one paycheck is a great start. But the real magic here is relentless consistency month after month. Fast forward exactly 1 year. Michael logs into that separate account and sees $15,000. Over 15 grand, saved up in just 12 months. When he saw that, tears literally filled his eyes. But you know what? The real reward wasn't even the cash. It was the fact that for the first time, he finally had hope. He wasn't terrified of a car breaking down anymore. He had built a real fortress around his future. And the long-term compounding effect of that single decision, it is staggering. At age 35, Michael made the choice to pay himself first. 10 years later, that consistency snowballed into a 6-figure investment portfolio. And by age 50, just 15 years after that incredibly stressful car repair, Michael was completely financially free. The math just works when you give it time.
Years later, sitting on his own porch, Michael realized something absolutely profound. The secret to his wealth was never, ever about earning some massive lottery-level salary. The secret was entirely about managing the money he already had differently. Making that one shift, from spending first to saving first, literally altered the trajectory of his entire life.
Because wealth is built one paycheck at a time. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens through the quiet, consistent habit of prioritizing your future self before you fund your current lifestyle. So I'm going to leave you with a challenge. When your very next payday arrives, who are you going to pay first? Are you going to pay your bills? Or are you going to pay yourself? Think about that for a second, because that one simple habit, it just might change everything for you. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I absolutely can't wait to guide you through our next topic.